My name James as I sat at my desk, vivid memories of the last 30 years with my wife, Emily, filled my mind. I found myself especially drawn to our honeymoon, replaying the best moments of my life in my head. Those unforgettable days in Florida with Emily were pure magic, a kaleidoscope of joy and intimacy that remains some of my most treasured memories. From the very start, it felt like we had stepped into a serene, otherworldly bubble, leaving all the worries of life behind. Hand in hand, we wandered along the sun-kissed sands of Clearwater Beach, the warm waves caressing our feet. The air was rich with the delicate scent of jasmine, enveloping us in a blanket of romance and tranquility. But it wasn't just the idyllic scenery that made that time so special. It was the adventures we shared. We hiked through lush forests and stumbled upon hidden waterfalls that seemed to have sprung from a fairy tale. Standing together in awe of the sheer beauty of nature, we felt as though the world itself was in harmony with our love. Our cozy little cottage in Key West offered breathtaking views of the sunset each evening. The sky would transform into a masterpiece of fiery oranges and soft purples, and as we held each other close, the love between us felt infinite. Our nights were equally enchanting, beginning with candlelit dinners on the beach, where we savored fresh seafood and local delicacies. Yet, it was Emily's gentle smile that truly made every moment unforgettable. That trip wasn't merely a vacation. It was a celebration of the love we had found in each other, a love that felt eternal. Lost in nostalgia, I was brought back to the present by the cheerful voice of my secretary. She smiled knowingly and teased, "Did you win the lottery, or something? You look like you're on cloud nine." I chuckled, brushing off her playful comment. "No lottery, but Emily's been incredibly sweet lately. It's like we're on a second honeymoon," I replied, my voice tinged with happiness. "I can't stop thinking about her. It feels like I'm falling in love all over again." Over the past 2 weeks, Emily had been showering me with affection, rekindling a spark I hadn't realized had faded. Every night, she seemed to crave closeness, reintroducing old habits from when we were newlyweds. It felt like a beautiful renewal of our bond, and I didn't question it for a second. I simply relished every moment. That evening, brimming with excitement, I left work early to plan a surprise for her. I picked up 24 roses, her favorite wine, and a box of chocolate-covered strawberries. I even wrote her a heartfelt note. My grand reveal would be a 7-day cruise I had secretly booked for us, an adventure I hoped would match the magic of our honeymoon. When I arrived home, I expected to find Emily waiting for me in the kitchen. Instead, our daughter, Jessica, was sitting at the table. "Hey, sweetie," I greeted her, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Where's your mom? I've got a special surprise planned for her tonight." Jessica hesitated, her expression troubled, as she glanced at the roses, wine, and chocolates I had set on the counter. "Dad," she said softly, "we need to talk." Her voice wavered, and I noticed her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Concerned, I pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "What's wrong, Jess? Is everything okay with your mom?" I asked, my stomach tightening with unease. Jessica took a deep breath. "Mom's fine, but there's something you need to know." Her hands trembled slightly as she folded them on the table. "Dad, you know how much Mom loves you, right? And how great things have been between you two lately." "Of course. That's why I planned all this," I said, gesturing to the gifts. A faint sense of dread began to creep in. Jessica looked down, blinking back tears. "I'm so sorry, Dad," she said, her voice breaking. "Mom, she's on a date tonight." Her words hit me like a thunderclap. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just heard. "What?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Jessica, what are you saying? Where is your mother?" "She's out with someone else," Jessica admitted, tears streaming down her face. "She didn't want to tell you because she didn't want to hurt you. It's just for one night, Dad. She said she'll be back tomorrow." I shook my head, disbelief and anger clashing within me. This has to be some kind of joke. Your mother would never betray me like this. We've been so happy lately. I don't understand." Jessica reached across the table, her voice pleading. "Dad, please. Mom loves you. but she felt like she needed something different. It's not about leaving you. It's just one night. She thought you'd understand. I stared at her, the world around me spinning. In that moment, everything I thought I knew about my marriage felt like it was slipping away. I stared at Jessica, struggling to comprehend what she had just told me. Jessica, why are you even involved in this? This is between your mother and me. You shouldn't be in the middle of it. How did she drag you into this? My voice was sharper than I intended, but my shock left no room for softness. Dad, you know Mom and I are close, she said, her voice trembling. We talk about everything. She confided in me about how things between you two had slowed down, and she felt neglected. I just wanted to help. My friend's dad lost his wife a few years ago, and he's been so lonely. I thought they could support each other, so I introduced them. I shot out of my chair, the legs scraping loudly against the floor, and the force knocked it over. Are you telling me that you set your mother up on a date with your friend's father? Is this real? Did you actually do this? Jessica shrank back as my words thundered through the room. I paced like a caged animal, unable to contain the anger that surged through me. Answer me, Jessica. My wife, your mother, is out with your friend's dad because of you? How could you do this to me? I'm sorry, Daddy. I really am, she whispered, barely audible through her sobs. It sounds bad when you say it like that, but I did it out of love, for both of you and for him. Love? I spat the word out like poison. Love for them? And what about me? Do I mean nothing to you? Am I just some fool you can cast aside while you play matchmaker? My voice cracked with a mixture of disbelief and fury. Where is she, Jessica? Where is your mother? And what did you mean when you said she won't be home until tomorrow? They went to a restaurant, Jessica stammered, her voice shaking, but I don't know which one. And yes, they're spending the night together, but it's just this one time. I swear, she'll be back tomorrow. She only loves you. All she's been saying for the past 2 weeks is how much she loves you. I stood frozen, her words cutting me to the core. The weight of betrayal pressed down on my chest. So all this affection, it wasn't real? It was just to ease her guilt? My voice grew cold. Well, Jessica, let me make something perfectly clear. This won't end the way you or your mother think it will. I promise you that. Tears streamed down her face as she reached for my arm, pleading with me. It's not like that, Dad. She never stopped loving you. Can't you give her just this one night? You've had 30 amazing years together. She loves you so much and can't imagine life without you. Please, don't throw it all away. No, Jessica, I replied, my voice flat and emotionless. That ship sailed the moment your mother agreed to go out with another man. Jessica wiped her tears, her voice desperate. He's my friend Mary's dad. He's really nice, Dad. I think you two would get along if you met. Oh, really? I interrupted with venom. You think we'd be great buddies? Maybe I can start hanging out with him, and on the weekends, I can just offer him your mom. Is that it? Maybe we can even be drinking buddies while I watch him parade around with my wife. Jessica flinched, the full force of my sarcasm hitting her like a blow. She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Dad, please, she whimpered. It's not like that. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the fury within me refused to be tamed. Jessica, listen to me carefully, I said, my voice like steel. I want you to leave. Now, I need time to process what you and your mother have done to me. Don't call me, don't write to me, and don't try to reach me. You are no longer my daughter. You're dead to me. Her head shot up, her tear-streaked face full of anguish. Dad, no. Please don't say that. I love you, and I don't want to leave you alone tonight. Mom and I planned for me to stay so you wouldn't be alone. Please don't send me away. Leave, Jessica, I repeated, my voice colder than ever. Your actions have shown me just how little respect you have for me as your father. You're your mother's daughter through and through. I worked hard for years to give you both a better life, and this is how you repay me. Get out. I have no daughter now. Her sobs filled the room as she stumbled to her feet. Dad, I love you. Please don't say this. Just wait until Mom comes home and explains everything tomorrow. I shook my head, my bitterness slicing through the air. She might have you. She might have him. Hell, she might have the whole world. But she'll never have me again. Forgiveness is out of the question. Everyone involved will pay, including the man who took your mother out. Now get out." Jessica fled the house, her sobs echoing behind her. I stood there in silence, the weight of my words sinking in. She had hoped I would understand, but there was no room for understanding, not with the betrayal I felt. As soon as she left, I dialed Emily's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Again and again, I called, leaving message after message, begging her to come home and explain. Each unanswered ring only deepened my despair. By 2 a.m., it was clear she wasn't coming back that night. Exhausted but unable to sleep, I sat in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. My mind wandered through our 30 years together. The birth of Jessica, the holidays, the anniversaries, all the moments that now seemed hollow. How could she throw it all away? For what? For one night with another man? As the first rays of dawn peeked through the curtains, my anger surged anew. My eyes landed on the backyard, on the art studio I had built for her 2 decades ago, a place where she created her masterpieces. It was her sanctuary, filled with everything she loved. And just like that, I knew what I had to do. Fueled by rage, I gathered all her belongings, her dresses, shoes, jewelry, even the photo albums. I hauled them out to the studio in trip after trip. Then I went to the attic and retrieved her wedding gown and every sentimental keepsake I could find. By the time I was finished, the pile of her things stood taller than me. At 5:30 a.m., I grabbed a gas can from the garage and marched to the studio. I gave her until 6 o'clock to come home, to try to salvage what little was left. If she didn't, it would all go up in flames. By 6:01, my hope was gone. Without hesitation, I doused the pile with gasoline, struck a match, and set it ablaze. As the fire roared to life, consuming everything, a wave of sorrow washed over me. Tears streamed down my face as I realized that just like that pile of possessions, my marriage had burned to ash. I didn't expect the fire to spread to the porch, but it did. Flames crept toward the house, and by the time the firefighters arrived, the damage was severe. The house, though still standing, was left uninhabitable from smoke and fire damage. Shaken, I fled to a motel 90 miles away, paying cash to avoid leaving a trail. Lying on the stiff bed, I turned off my phone, letting sleep finally take me. But the peace didn't last long. When I turned my phone back on the next day, it was flooded with missed calls and frantic messages. From Jessica, from Emily, and even from the sheriff. Emily arrived to find firefighters clustered near the house, their somber expressions confirming her worst fears. "Are you the homeowner?" one of the firefighters asked as she approached, his tone steady but serious. "Yes, I'm Emily Harper," she replied, her voice trembling, her heart pounding in her chest. "Well, Mrs. he began. We managed to save most of the house. Only the back porch was damaged, but it will need significant repairs. Unfortunately, the studio in the back couldn't be saved." Emily felt her knees give way. "Is everything in the studio gone?" she asked, her voice shaking with emotion. "I'm afraid so," the firefighter answered gently. "All that's left are ashes and debris. We're still investigating the cause of the fire, but a police detective would like to speak with you." Emily stood shakily, trying to process his words. The studio, her sanctuary, was gone. She made her way toward the back of the house where Sergeant Bennett was waiting, his expression unreadable. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "do you have any idea what might have caused the fire?" "No," she replied weakly. "I wasn't home last night." The sergeant's eyes narrowed as he glanced at Alex. "And you are?" he asked. "Just a friend," Alex answered, his face reddening under the weight of the sergeant's scrutiny. The sergeant raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Do you know where your husband is, Mrs. Harper?" "I don't," Emily admitted, a pang of guilt tightening in her chest. "I haven't spoken to him." "And where were you last night?" he asked, his tone sharpening. Emily hesitated, the shame almost too much to bear. "I was with Alex," she said quietly, "at the Hilton downtown." The sergeant's gaze hardened slightly, the judgment in his eyes unmistakable. She felt the weight of her confession, standing there amidst the wreckage of her life. Her sanctuary was gone, her husband was missing, and now she had to face the reality of her actions. "When you do hear from him," the sergeant said, handing her a card, "please give him my contact information." Emily nodded numbly, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Anger and fear surged within her. Anger at the destruction of her beloved studio, and fear of Sheriff reaction. She had to find him, to explain, to somehow salvage the ruins of their life together. She called Jessica, desperation in her voice. "Jessica, have you heard from your dad?" "No," Jessica replied, her voice breaking. "I haven't spoken to him since last night." "Mom, why didn't you stay with him like we planned?" "He kicked me out and disowned me." Emily's breath caught. "He disowned you?" she repeated, stunned. James had never said anything like that before. If he had truly disowned our daughter, things were worse than she had imagined. Determined, Emily went inside the house. But the acrid smell of smoke hit her immediately. The walls were darkened with soot, and their once cozy home was now a shadow of what it had been. She went to the bedroom to gather some clothes, but when she opened the closet, her heart sank. Everything was gone. Her clothes, shoes, jewelry, everything had been cleared out. She rushed to her nightstand, hoping to find her wedding rings, but the drawer was empty. Panic consumed her as she realized what James must have thought when he saw the rings were missing. She ran through the house, searching for any sign of her belongings, but it was no use. Her possessions were gone, her connection to this home severed. She made her way to the studio, hoping against hope that something had survived. Among the charred remains, she found fragments of photo frames and scraps of fabric. It was clear. James had destroyed everything. Tears streamed down her face as she called Jessica again. "It's all gone," she sobbed. "My clothes, my paintings, the studio, everything is gone." "Mom, don't blame yourself," Jessica pleaded. "You can stay with us until the house is repaired. We'll get you new clothes and help you rebuild." Emily shook her head, though Jessica couldn't see her. "I've lost your father," she whispered through her tears. "What I did is unforgivable. I should have talked to him instead of going on that date." "Mom, don't give up hope. Dad loves you," Jessica said, though her own voice trembled with doubt. Just then, Emily's phone rang. Seeing James's name on the screen, she answered, her breath hitching. "James? Is that you?" "Yes, Emily," came his cold reply. "James, please, where are you? Come home. We need to talk," she begged. "No, Emily. I know everything. Everything from your daughter. Yes, your daughter. She's not mine anymore. You're both dead to me." "James, don't say that," she cried. "I love you. The studio, it's gone. Did you do this?" "You did this, Emily." "Not me," he said with venom. "Maybe I didn't light the match, but your betrayal is what burned everything to the ground. When I saw your wedding rings left behind and realized you gave yourself to someone else, you died to me. What you did is unforgivable." "James, please," she sobbed. "We've had 30 wonderful years together. Can't we talk and work this out?" "No, Emily," he replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "You planned this betrayal. You gave me 2 weeks of affection to ease your guilt, and then you cheated, with our daughter's help. There's no way to accept or forgive that. James, don't do this. I love you," she pleaded desperately. "This is over. Contact my lawyer for anything further. Goodbye, Emily." "James, James, wait," she screamed, but the line went dead. She collapsed onto the ground, sobbing uncontrollably as the weight of his words crushed her. When Jessica arrived, they clung to each other, mourning the destruction of their family. But it was clear, there was no going back. The damage had been done, and James had made his decision. The next day, Emily received the divorce papers, and the life she had built over 30 years crumbled to ash. Emily sat in her dimly lit apartment, overwhelmed by the realization that her infidelity had cost her everything. The marriage she had once cherished was gone, torn apart by her own choices. She sought reconciliation, reaching out to James through calls, letters, and even sessions with a counselor in hopes of repairing the rift. But James remained steadfast in his silence, offering her no closure, no hope of redemption. Mike, Jessica's husband, eventually reached out to James to apologize on her behalf. He admitted that Emily's involvement in the affair had been misguided and deeply hurtful, but his words did little to mend the damage. James refused to entertain the idea of forgiveness. For Mike, the incident had shaken the foundation of his marriage to Jessica. He began questioning her loyalty and values, wondering how he could trust her in the future. Their relationship became strained, and they entered couples counseling in an effort to salvage what was left of their union. Emily, meanwhile, clung to the hope of returning to the home they had built together. But when the divorce decree arrived, it brought nothing but bitter finality. The house was awarded to James, along with primary ownership of their remaining shared assets. Emily received half of their savings and $3,000 a month in alimony for the next decade, a lifeline she would soon discover James had no intention of honoring. Forced to confront the harsh reality of her situation, Emily realized she needed to support herself for the first time in decades. She moved out of Jessica's apartment and into a small, one-room flat on the outskirts of the city. It was a far cry from the comfortable life she had once enjoyed. Desperate to make ends meet, she took a job at a modest art gallery, selling pieces that reminded her of the creative spark she had lost long ago. Her days were filled with mundane tasks, and her nights were plagued by regret. The vibrant life she had shared with James was gone, replaced by the cold monotony of a life she had chosen in one reckless moment. As for Jessica, she spiraled into a deep depression following her parents' divorce. Therapy became her refuge, a place where she could process the guilt and grief of her role in the affair. Her marriage to Mike was fragile at best, and she struggled to rebuild the trust she had shattered. The dream of starting a family was placed on indefinite hold as they grappled with their own turmoil. Months later, James completed the repairs on the house, restoring it to its former beauty. Emily heard through mutual acquaintances that he was continuing to make the court-mandated alimony payments, albeit reluctantly. Then, without warning, James sold the house. Emily learned of the sale only when she went to the property, driven by a desperate need to see him one last time. When she rang the doorbell, it was answered by a young couple. The woman smiled politely. "Hello, can we help you?" "I'm looking for James Harper," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is he here?" The woman tilted her head in thought before replying, "Oh, you mean the nice man who sold us the house?" "No, he mentioned he was leaving the country for a fresh start. He was incredibly kind. Are you Emily, by any chance?" Emily's heart sank. "Yes, I am." The woman stepped back, retrieving an envelope from a small table near the door. "He left this for you," she said, handing it to Emily. "He said to give it to you if you ever came by." "Thank you," Emily murmured, clutching the envelope as if it were a lifeline. "Enjoy your new home." Tears blurred her vision as she walked back to her car, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Sitting behind the wheel, she stared at the envelope, her hands trembling. It was the last piece of James she would ever have. When she finally found the courage to open it, her tears flowed freely as she read his words. "Emily, 30 remarkable years. I will forever cherish the beautiful life we shared. You were my first and only love, and I regret deeply that I couldn't be the husband you needed. If I had known you needed more, I would have moved mountains for you. But you chose to walk this path alone, and so our marriage ends. As much as I loved you, I cannot forget the pain of your betrayal. Love cannot survive without trust, and ours was irreparably broken. You may not understand now, but one day you will. I hope you find peace, and I hope you never forget the love we had. Goodbye, Emily." "James." Emily clutched the letter to her chest, her sobs echoing in the stillness of her tiny apartment. She had lost not only her husband, but also the life they had built together, all for one fleeting night. The magnitude of her regret was unbearable, but there was no turning back. James was gone, truly gone, and the love she had taken for granted was now just a memory. Emily sat motionless on her bed, clutching James's letter in trembling hands. She had thought there were no more tears left to cry, but the words he had written broke through her fragile composure. Her sobs filled the small, quiet apartment as she curled into herself, overwhelmed by a tidal wave of regret and despair. The man she had shared 30 years with, The man who had loved her with unwavering devotion was gone forever. My words cut deeper than anything she had ever experienced. Those 2 wonderful weeks before your betrayal, I actually believed you had rekindled your love for me. They were the happiest weeks of our entire marriage. Learning from Jessica that you used those days to distract me from what was really happening shattered me. That night, I came home eager to surprise you with 2 dozen roses, your favorite chocolates, and a special bottle of wine. I had planned to reveal a week-long yacht cruise to celebrate our love. But discovering that your affection was just a cover for your affair left me utterly humiliated. Congratulations, Emily. You've destroyed me and our marriage. I can't stay in this city any longer. I've resigned from my job and started a new life in another country. Don't bother looking for me. I have no desire to speak to you or our daughter again. This chapter of my life is closed, and I am beginning a new one without either of you. It will take me years to heal from the pain you inflicted, but I will recover without you. I hope that night was worth everything we had together. I suspect it was. You and Jessica will have plenty to talk about. Have a happy life, and please forget me as I already have. As Emily reread those final lines, she felt the full weight of what she had lost. At 52 and utterly alone, she faced a bleak future. One selfish night had cost her everything. Her husband, her home, and the dreams they had built together. However, I hadn't left without confronting the man who had destroyed his marriage. Late one evening, just days before his flight to Costa Rica, I arrived unannounced at Alex's home. When Alex answered the door, I wasted no time pushing his way inside, the fury of weeks spent nursing his pain boiling to the surface. "I'm James Harper, Emily's husband," I growled, my voice low and menacing. "You stole her from me." Alex raised his hands defensively, trying to explain. "Look, I didn't mean..." But I wasn't there for excuses. The crowbar I have hidden behind my back came crashing down as I unleashed the full force of his rage. In minutes, Alex was broken and bloodied on the floor, gasping in pain. As I stood over him, chest heaving, I issued a final warning. "Take my advice. Messing with a married woman is bad for your health." By the time Alex was rushed to the ER and reported the assault, I was boarding a flight to Costa Rica, safely beyond the reach of U.S. law. With no extradition agreement for assault charges, I faced no consequences. Alex, meanwhile, spent weeks in the hospital and months in physical therapy. The shattered knees and 25 stitches on his face became permanent reminders of that ill-fated night with a married woman. Hearing about Alex's attack devastated both Emily and Jessica. They realized the true extent of my anguish and how deeply their actions had hurt me. The guilt they carried became unbearable, a constant reminder of their misguided belief that one night of indulgence could somehow preserve their family. Instead, it had destroyed everything. For Jessica, the loss of her father's love was a wound that refused to heal. Mike, her husband, nearly ended their marriage over her role in the affair. "You arranged a date for your mother with another man," he had said, his voice filled with disbelief. "And you left your dad alone? How could you do that to him?" Their relationship remained strained as they entered couples therapy, where Jessica confronted the depth of her mistakes. After 2 years of proving her loyalty and commitment, Mike finally agreed to start a family. But Jessica's joy was tempered by the knowledge that her father would never meet his grandchildren. I have cut her out of his life completely, and no amount of pleading could reopen the door she had slammed shut. Emily's life became a monotonous cycle of work and solitude. Gone were the days of luxury and comfort. She now lived in a small, lonely apartment and spent her days working at a modest art gallery. Her dreams of a happy future with me and our grandchildren were shattered, replaced by endless regret and a gnawing sense of emptiness. 6 months after leaving the country, I found myself sitting on a quiet beach in Costa Rica, a cold beer in hand. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting golden light over the water. I reflected on the life I have left behind and the lessons I have learned. Divorce is natural, I thought to myself. People grow apart, and moving on is acceptable. What's not acceptable is staying in a relationship where you're neither valued nor cherished. As the waves lapped at the shore, I made a silent vow. This would never be his reality again.